On June 25, 1876, at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, 5 companies of the U.S. 7th Cavalry, under the direct command of George Armstrong Custer, were wiped out. Among the dead were these officers: Captain Tom Custer, 31, rode with the 5 companies led personally by George Custer. Tom Custer had distinguished himself during the Civil War, receiving the Medal of Honor twice for bravery, becoming the first of only 16 individuals in American history to achieve this distinction. After the Civil War, Tom Custer was appointed a first lieutenant in the 7th Cavalry. He was wounded at the Battle of the Washita and took part in the Black Hills Expedition of 1874. During the 1876 campaign, he served as aide-de-camp to his older brother Lieutenant Colonel George A. Custer and died with his brother on Last Stand Hill. In an interview given in 1900, Dr. Henry Porter recounted, "As soon as we could, several of the officers and myself went over to where Custer had fought. We found Custer's body stark naked, as white and clean as a baby's. He was shot in the head and breast." The body of Captain Tom Custer, General Custer's brother, was horribly mutilated. He was disemboweled, and his head had been crushed in by a blow from a stone hammer used by the Indians. The only arrow wound I found was in his head. He had the Sioux mark of death, which was a cut from the hip to the knee, reaching to the bone. His heart was not cut out, as has been reported. In fact, Tom Custer's body had been so badly mutilated that his remains were identified only by a recognizable tattoo of his initials on his arm. The bodies of George and Tom Custer were wrapped in canvas and blankets, then buried on the field in a shallow grave. When soldiers returned a year later, the brothers' grave had been scavenged by animals and the bones scattered. According to a witness, not more than a double handful of small bones were picked up. George Custer was reinterred with full military honors at West Point Cemetery on October 10, 1877. The remains of Tom Custer were reinterred at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Captain Miles Keogh, an Irish immigrant and seasoned soldier, joined the 7th Cavalry in 1866 after distinguished service in the Union Army during the Civil War. During the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Keogh commanded a detachment on Battle Ridge. He and his men attempted to hold the southern end of the ridge but were overrun by Lakota and Cheyenne warriors. His body was found surrounded by several of his men, and his horse, Comanche, survived the battle, later becoming a symbol of the fallen regiment. The medals of Captain Miles Keogh tell an interesting story. The senior captain among the 5 companies wiped out with Custer, Keogh's body was found at the center of a group of troopers that included his 2 sergeants, company trumpeter and guidon bearer. Keogh was stripped but not mutilated, perhaps because of the medicine the Indians saw in 2 papal medals he wore on a chain around his neck. Vatican records confirm these 2 medals were given to Keogh during the Papal War of 1860. Captain Benteen secured the medals, which were sent to Keogh's sister in Ireland. They remained in the family until 1988, when they passed into the hands of a well-known collector. The medals were recently auctioned off for $35,000. Captain George Yates served with valor during the Civil War, fighting in major battles like Antietam, Fredericksburg, and Gettysburg. He earned several brevet promotions and became close friends with George Armstrong Custer. After the war, Yates was appointed a captain in the 7th Cavalry in 1866, where he commanded Company F. He was part of the so-called Custer Clan, a tight-knit group of officers loyal to Custer. He died alongside Custer and was initially buried on the battlefield before being reinterred at Fort Leavenworth National Cemetery. First Lieutenant William W. Cooke, a Canadian who was the regimental adjutant and was known as Queen's Own Cooke. Cooke was known for his long side whiskers that he always wore. Cooke was awarded brevet promotions to captain, major and lieutenant colonel for his bravery during the Civil War. He joined the regular army after the war and was made a 2nd lieutenant in the 7th Cavalry in 1866. In 1868 he participated in the Washita campaign. At the Battle of the Washita, Cooke, one of the best shots in the regiment, commanded 40 sharpshooters. Cooke's men hid themselves on the northern side of the river and shot down Cheyennes fleeing Custer's charge. Chief Black Kettle and his wife Medicine Woman later were killed by Cooke's sharpshooters. In 1871, Cooke became the regimental adjutant reporting to Custer. Cooke became a close friend of Tom Custer and became part of what was known as the Custer Gang, a close-knit group of Custer's friends and relatives. The anti-Custer faction within the regiment, including Captain Frederick Benteen and Major Marcus Reno, began calling him the Queen's Own. On the day of battle at the Little Bighorn, June 25, 1876, Cooke was by the side of George Armstrong Custer. He is remembered for writing Custer's final orders to Captain Benteen: "Come on. Big village. Be quick. Bring packs. W. Cooke. P.S. Bring packs." Cooke died alongside Custer. He was scalped twice, the second trophy being his side whiskers. The Cheyenne warrior Wooden Leg claimed to have scalped the whiskers from one side of Cooke's face. He gave this trophy to his grandmother, who didn't think much of it and discarded it 2 nights later at a victory dance. First Lieutenant James Calhoun was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1845. He enlisted in the Union Army in 1864. By the end of the Civil War, he held the rank of sergeant. After the war, Calhoun accepted a commission as a second lieutenant in the infantry and served in the Western Territories. He married Margaret (Maggie) Custer, sister of George Armstrong Custer, in 1872. This connection brought him into the inner circle of the so-called Custer clan. Calhoun was promoted to first lieutenant and transferred to Company C of the 7th U.S. Cavalry, which was commanded by Captain Tom Custer, George's brother. At the Battle of the Little Bighorn in 1876, Calhoun was acting commander of Company C, as Tom Custer was serving as aide-de-camp to his brother. Calhoun and his men made their last stand on what is now known as Calhoun Hill, where evidence suggests they fought fiercely before being overwhelmed. He was initially buried on the battlefield. His remains were later moved to Fort Leavenworth. Calhoun was nicknamed the Adonis of the 7th because of his striking appearance. First Lieutenant James Ezekiel Porter was born in Strong, Maine, in 1847. Porter graduated from West Point in 1869 and was commissioned into the 7th Cavalry under General George Armstrong Custer. He served during the Reconstruction era, including assignments aimed at suppressing the Ku Klux Klan in the South. By 1872, he had risen to the rank of first lieutenant and was assigned to Company I. During the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Porter was part of Custer's column that attacked the Native American village. His body was never recovered or positively identified, making his final moments a subject of speculation. One account suggests he may have broken through enemy lines in a desperate attempt to seek help, only to be pursued and killed by warriors. Among modern researchers, the consensus is that Porter's body was one of 3 officers' bodies never identified, even though his death was verified by his bloody jacket found in the abandoned Indian village. First Lieutenant Algernon Smith, born in New York in 1842, Smith served with distinction during the Civil War, where he was wounded at Fort Fisher and was made a brevet major for gallantry. He joined the 7th Cavalry in 1867 and became part of Custer's inner circle, the so-called the Custer clan. Custer affectionately called him Fresh Smith, to distinguish him from another officer nicknamed Salty Smith. Smith took part in the Battle of the Washita. He was promoted to first lieutenant on December 5, 1868. He participated in most of the 7th Cavalry's campaigns, including the 1873 Yellowstone Campaign and as assistant quartermaster in the 1874 Black Hills Expedition. He was killed during the final stand and his body was found near Custer's. He was initially buried on the battlefield, but reinterred in 1877 at Fort Leavenworth National Cemetery. First Lieutenant William Van Wyck Rayleigh was one of the youngest officers in the 7th Cavalry Regiment and among those killed at the Battle of the Little Bighorn on June 25, 1876. Born on December 12, 1853, Rayleigh came from a naval family. Rayleigh himself entered the Naval Academy in 1870, but resigned in 1872 after academic difficulties. He later joined the 10th U.S. Cavalry as a second lieutenant in 1875 and transferred to the 7th Cavalry in early 1876, just months before the Battle of the Little Bighorn. He was described as a dashing and handsome officer, though some accounts suggest he was still learning to ride when the regiment departed on the final campaign. His signet ring was later recovered from a captured Cheyenne warrior in 1877 and returned to Riley's mother. His remains were reinterred at Mount Olivet Cemetery in Washington, D.C. Second Lieutenant James Sturgis on June 16, 1875. James Jack Sturgis graduated from West Point and was appointed a second lieutenant in the 7th Cavalry. Jack Sturgis, at 22, was the youngest officer in the regiment. He was also the son of the 7th Cavalry's commanding officer, Colonel Samuel Sturgis. Lieutenant Jack Sturgis would have had little time to get to know Custer. He arrived at his duty station at Fort Abraham Lincoln in October 1875. In March 1876, Custer went east to testifying before Congress. Custer would not return until May 1876 in time to lead the troops in the field in the campaign against the Sioux. On June 25, 1876, on the day of Custer's last fight, Lieutenant Sturgis was with Company E, one of the 5 companies under Custer's direct command that day, all of which were destroyed. According to archaeological evidence and Native American accounts, it appears that Company E conducted a disciplined retreat toward Last Stand Hill until overwhelmed. Jack Sturgis's body was never officially identified. His blood-soaked underwear was picked up by General Terry's troops across the river in the remnants of a Lakota camp. Several decapitated corpses were found near the river, and one soldier later claimed he recognized Sturgis's scorched head along with several others in a Lakota fire pit. It is believed that the unidentified remains of Jack Sturgis were buried in a mass grave with the enlisted soldiers. Second Lieutenant John James Crittenden, born in Frankfort, Kentucky, in 1854, Crittenden came from a prominent political and military family. His grandfather was U.S. Senator John J. Crittenden, known for the failed Crittenden Compromise before the Civil War. He entered West Point in 1871 but was discharged in 1874 after failing philosophy. Despite this setback, his family's influence helped him secure a commission as a second lieutenant in 1875. Crittenden was attached to the 7th Cavalry's Company L in May 1876, just weeks before the Battle of the Little Bighorn. He served under First Lieutenant James Calhoun, Custer's brother-in-law. Crittenden had suffered a hunting accident in 1875 that cost him his left eye, which was replaced with a glass eye, a detail that would later help identify his body. His remains were initially buried where he fell, at his family's request. In 1931, due to road construction, his body was reinterred at the Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument. Second Lieutenant Henry Harrington, born in Albion, New York, in 1849, Harrington graduated from West Point in 1872, ranking 17th in his class. He was assigned to Company C, and by 1876, due to a shortage of officers, he was placed in command of that company despite holding the rank of second lieutenant. Harrington participated in several key campaigns, including the Yellowstone Expedition of 1873 and the Black Hills Expedition of 1874, both under Lieutenant Colonel George A. Custer. During the Little Bighorn campaign, he accompanied Major Marcus Reno on a scouting mission just days before the battle. On the day of the battle, Harrington and his company were part of Custer's detachment. His body was never positively identified, one of only 3 officers for whom this was the case. His wife made a series of trips to the battlefield to look for his body, but to no avail.